Last hour of the program, because it's a Thursday, that means we head on down to Cheyenne, Wyoming, where Amy Edmonds is back from her long vacation. By the way, I heard that a couple of years ago there was an attempted coup at the Capitol. Amy was at the center of the whole thing. Rumors? No.
Rumors, I'm sure.
Okay, just checking. It was someone named Amy. I assumed it was you.
Some other Amy.
Yeah, okay. So Amy's online today to talk to us about what's happening at the Department of Education, and this time, though, to specifically pick up a topic. Does this have to do with testing?
Everything about education has to do with testing, yes.
Right.
Yeah, this is the state accountability bill.
Right. Oh, well, now, when I say a state accountability bill, let's be a little more specific. Testing students or testing teachers?
Well, the accountability bill is about a little bit about both. So this is the, let's see, what do we have here? The fourth iteration. They started in 2011, so we have a bill from 2011, 2012, 2013, and now this is the 2014 bill. Attempting to create.
Why do they keep doing this? Why do they keep? How come they can't settle on a bill?
So we're $2.1 million into this endeavor to create a state accountability system. And Wyoming is not unique in this. This is something that all states are most states are embarking on because of some of the multiple requirements by the federal government.
Okay. Well, okay, so we're doing this in part, Amy, because the federal government is telling us that we have to do this?
Yes, the federal government is requiring all kinds of different data collection and all kinds of different things that really require us to start a statewide accountability system. As a matter of fact, in some of their requirements, they specifically talk about statewide accountability systems. So this is the one thing that I really want to press upon people so they understand. It's that Wyoming's embarking on a state accountability system is not unique to Wyoming.
Right.
We are not doing this because we're brilliant and we think even more centralization of education is a great idea. Apparently we do think that, but we are creating this system because, like all the other states, we have to provide things to the federal government that we don't have right now.
Okay, now and just to get this first part out of the way, for those people who will be asking the question, does this have anything to do with Common Core? That's a big issue right now.
Well, yeah, actually, going through this latest iteration, this fourth bill of the 4 or 5 years embarking, some of the things in there, one of the big things in there is yet another kind of hook to standards. So there is this discussion about requiring districts to basically yearly report to the State Department of Education that their curriculum is aligned to the state standards. And as we know, in the state standards, the Common Core are two right now, two of the standards in English language arts and in math, which are two of the areas that we assess or we test for. So yes, more so than we've seen in the past, there's now this hook requiring districts to make sure that their curriculum maps, so the curriculum plans that they use, are aligned to the standards. And there's also penalties. So it also, if you're there's a tiered system in the Accountability Act, and I don't want to get too detailed where I scare people off here, but the Accountability Act creates a 4-tiered system for schools. Schools that are exceeding expectations, schools that are meeting expectations, schools that are not meeting, and schools, or partially meeting and then not meeting. So that 4th tier, not meeting at all, that means you are a failing school. If you're one of those, if you're in that category, that tier 4, the state's going to come in and review your system, your curriculum, to make sure that you are tightly aligned with the state standards. So yes, this is where we see the Common Core coming into play.
Okay, now the next part of this is there any part of it that you think, because right away when I hear Common Core, I think, well, none of this can be good. Is there any part of this that you actually think is good for the schools in Wyoming?
You know, this is such a continuation down the road of centralizing education. This is taking away more and more of the control locally and placing it in the legislature's hands or in the Department of Education's hand vis-a-vis the governor. So do I think the ideas of holding people who spend taxpayer monies like a public education system accountable? Of course. But the only way we're truly going to create accountability in a system is not making government accountable to government, but making government accountable to the people.
Right.
So we should be getting more local control, not less.
Right, especially local parents. If their students are doing well, then they would tend to head down to a school board meeting or whatever the version today of a PTA meeting. My mom used to go to those.
Right.
Parents Association, and have a talk with their. Am I dating myself by saying PTA? I mean, does that?
No, you're not, Glenn. You're not.
No, because if I'm dating myself, I'm dating you at that point, and that everybody knows how old we are, and let's just not go there anymore.
Exactly. Let's just be in denial.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So now, if we didn't do this, though, would the federal government cut off funds? I mean, there's obviously penalties, right? If we just decided not to do this?
Right, we would not be meeting certain requirements that we have, either under our waiver that we applied for, or under the ARA funds. If you remember, Governor Freudenthal took about $64 million in ARA funds. It's called the State Fiscal Stabilization Fund, and in that we have all of these requirements, and part of that has to do with the state accountability system and also the data collection system, the state longitudinal data collection. We have to do all this data collection to meet all these requirements.
All right, let me head over to the phone and see if this is on topic here. This is Glenn, who is on the phones.
This is Bill, Glenn. I just like to make a comment. Why don't our state legislators get off their bottom sides instead of worrying about this and that? If they don't do it, they'll get penalized by the federal government. Get us out of the federal government, get them out of our educational system, and that includes the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for calling.
I'll let you go and hang up.
All right, thanks. Well, that's someone who just wants us out in general, and I think that goes around the state of Wyoming. I hear it a lot, but I don't hear that when I walk into the hallways of the state legislature.
Well, no, but I think it's absolutely what Wyoming needs to do. And one of the places that really we could actually start doing this would be the State Department of Education. When you look at the overall what we're spending on education and how much federal money is coming in, we really could go into the State Department of Education and just remove all federal funds. Now, you're right, to a lot of legislators, this is shocking talk. I mean, it's very upsetting to them, and they don't like to think about it. But when if you start adding up, right now we're $2.1 million down the road in this accountability system, and that's just money that I can calculate that's been appropriated through the bills. That's not including how much money your districts have been spending to train their teachers, to change to these new Common Core standards, to start buying technology, to be able to test every child with a computer, you're getting bandwidth. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is just a cursory count of monies just in these bills. If we start adding all this up, we're going to get way over the $64 million we accepted in federal funds.
Wow. Well, I'm talking with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group about testing standards, I guess we can say, for schools, which brings me not just into the money, because I was thinking about this as you were setting this up, because we're talking about not just the money, but the time as well to implement all of this. And so I wonder, just like we end up teaching students to the test, do we end up teaching schools and teachers to the test? You see what I mean? We're not improving the system. Instead, we're sending them down a path of just trying to meet standards on a piece of paper rather than improve. Am I making sense?
No, you are, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. In continuing to centralize the education system, we're taking more and more sort of teachers' ability to teach what they know works in the classroom away from them. Right. We're telling them, this is what you're going to teach, this is how you're going to teach it, this is how we're going to assess it, and if your children don't score well, there will be penalties.
All right, let's go back to the phones. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
Hey, Glenn, it's Levon.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I heard that we here in Wyoming spend the most amount per student on education. How much per student is that?
Right now, on average, we spend about $16,000 per student.
Wow. Okay, cool, thanks.
All right, thanks for calling. 16,000, and do you think we're getting that back, Amy?
You know, we have mediocre test scores. So we're somewhere nationally, we're somewhere in the middle. I mean, we're not number one, we're not top 10, but we're always kind of around there.
Yeah. Okay. Now I don't want to get you too far off of what you were bringing as a topic. It's just that this brings up in my mind so many different issues. And for those just joining me, I'm talking with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group. So, what do our teachers have to go through in order to meet the standards? I mean, do you have some curriculum in front of you? You could give us an idea of what they're going to have to curriculum or they're going to have to meet in order to stay qualified as a school or as a teacher.
Right. Well, so much of this really is going to revolve around the assessment piece, how these children are going to be tested, what they're going to be tested for. And that, Glenn, we don't have yet. Wyoming continues to tussle over this idea. We are a governing state in the Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, the SBAC. There's been a lot of discussion, and a lot of parents are pretty upset about this. For right now, we've seen the Joint Education Accountability Committee sort of want to hold on moving forward with the SBAC. The SBAC is one of two national consortiums that states join to essentially provide their assessment for them. And it will be an online assessment. Students will sit in front of a computer, take a test, and complete the test. The states will get the scores, kind of thing. Until we really know what's on those tests. So right now you have the Department of Education, you have people like the governor saying, hey, teachers can teach what they want to teach. The Common Core standards aren't going to dictate curriculum. That is just verbal malpractice. If you ask, I think they're totally misleading people.
That was a really great way for you to put that. That was good. I'm impressed. Verbal malpractice.
It's totally unfair to say that, because really everything is going to be tied to this assessment. So until we know what's being on those tests, then we'll really know.
All right. Now here's an interesting question based on that. So since we really don't know what we're dealing with here, then how do the legislators write legislation accordingly, and how do the schools then write curriculum or react accordingly if we don't even know what we're getting at this point?
Well, for this, I think most of the districts understand how important it is for them to purchase curriculum that is as tightly aligned to the standards as possible.
Right.
I think they understand that, and we've seen that in other states, and we've seen it just if you look at the free market, we've seen the fact that all the few numbers of textbook companies and curriculum companies have pretty much transitioned completely over to all of the Common Core, all of the curriculum or the standards that are being required. So for districts, it's a wait and see kind of thing. For the legislature, there's really they don't have any skin in the game, Glenn. They can just continue to come up with this creative system and wait and see what happens.
Now, on the local level, since we still have parents who can go to meetings and talk to their local school board, what can happen on the local level, if anything, to let's say stave off the damage that can be done by this?
Well, I think parents still need to continue to participate, go to their local school board meetings, demand to know what's happening in the system. From those parents that I talk to that are attending these meetings, what many of them hear from their school boards are, our hands are tied. The state requires us to do that. And I think that's the bigger question. That's such an important question, that the state really has continue to centralize education. So parents need to also not just go to their school board meetings, but they need to be contacting their legislators and saying, hands off our education system.
It's interesting because I hear whenever we get around election season, which we will be in this year in the election season, so many who run for office on the local level and on the state level will talk to us about decentralizing education and bringing it back into the state of Wyoming. So what I don't understand is if this is, I guess we're just being lied to, because this is what they tell us, and yet you come to us with this assessment test and Common Core coming into the state. So what they're telling us out there on the election field and what they're doing in office, two completely different things?
Yeah, I think legislators, I know from my own experience, Glenn, and I can talk personally to this, you go into the legislature and you really feel this sense of responsibility, and it's sort of put on you. All of the Campbell County decisions essentially said that the legislature is going to be heavily involved in creating this uniform system, this equitable system, and they really sell that to legislators hard, that listen, the legislature has this profound role in education, whether we like it or not, let's run with it. And for many legislators, even conservative legislators, the idea of holding schools accountable for the money that they spend, I think rings to them. It resonates to them. I think what they need to, and it resonated with me for a while, until I realized that really all we're doing is centralizing the system, and more importantly, we are trapping people in a monopoly system that they cannot get out of. So at the bare minimum, parents need to be talking to their legislators about, listen, you want to continue down this road, whatever. You need to allow us the freedom to get out.
I'm talking with Amy Edmonds from Wyoming Liberty Group. Hang in there, Amy. I got to pay a couple of bills, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up. From Wyoming Liberty Group is Amy Edmonds. I want to make sure before I ask you the next couple of questions, because you bring up a bunch of questions to mind. We got about 6 minutes left. Did I get you too far off topic? Did you touch all the things that you wanted to talk about on this issue?
I think I'll hit on one other thing, Glenn, and then we'll go to your questions. On the state accountability system, there's another area in this bill where they're dealing with the high school graduation requirements. And so this is a change, and I think it's an important change to note. They're removing, Wyoming right now has it has a tiered system, which we call the body of evidence. So on top of our requirements, which are 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of science, and 3 years of social studies, we require a body of evidence. So we don't require a senior test. A lot of states require like an exit exam to say, hey, you now can get your diploma. Wyoming, we do not. We have a tiered system where the districts have the choice to come up with a body of evidence to prove that the student has successfully completed the courses. Okay? We're removing that. We're actually getting rid of the tiered system and going back to essentially a final exam test. We're also changing, it used to be a requirement of 3 years of math, we're going up to now 4 years of math. So I think those are two important graduation changes that we see through this bill, and of course the bill still has to go before the full legislature.
Okay, well, one of the questions that came to mind is, since we keep talking about getting away from a centralized system and getting back to a system in Wyoming, and you've dealt a lot with this, what is a system that actually does work in making sure that your school, the school that you're sending your kids to, is up to par and the children are learning what they need to learn? Do you know of a good system that we should embrace? Because obviously anything that the federal government has sent us, from Common Core to No Child Left Behind, hasn't been working. What works out there?
I don't think there's a silver bullet, but I think there's a whole plethora of things that we can do. The first thing really legislators can focus on is deregulating education, and private education in particular. Really, it comes down, Glenn, to that choice idea. First and foremost, parents need to be able to have the ability to hold the education system accountable with their feet. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to leave the system and go the way they want to go. If they want to homeschool, if they want to multifamily homeschool, and this is one of the areas that we need to deregulate, where 2 or 3 families can't come together and hire a teacher, and we have all this over-regulation when it comes to private education. After that, inside the public education system, there are all kinds of ideas that really need to happen. So obviously the whole idea of not being able to fire your teacher or your principal, they get tenure and they're there for forever and ever and ever. So we should be able to focus in, just like in a private business. If you as a private business owner can fire an employee for not producing what you want them to produce, that should happen in the public education system. So number one thing, and it's never one silver bullet. So obviously, we very much support deregulation of and allowing parents to hold the system accountable with their feet. So from private schools to charter schools to vouchers, all those things should be on the table and available to schools, to parents. Because again, creating a system that holds government accountable to government is a failure from the go.
Absolutely. This is Glenn, who's on the phone.
Glenn, I have a question for Amy, and I agree with a lot of what she just was saying. But a lot of people that I know have a concern about the quality and what they are teaching. The kids in school with this Common Core, does it mean that the requirements that you learn how to do multiplication tables before you learn how to add and subtract? Does it mean a difference in the reading skills? Does it mean a difference in what they're being taught as far as civics, science, history? I would be real interested, and I think a lot of people would, if there were more specifics on that. Thank you.
Right. Well, and let me add something to that. It depends on the student, I think, Amy, because I struggled through school because of dyslexia, and they didn't know what dyslexia was back then. Every student is different. We don't think the same. So I think that's part of the reason, correct me if you think I'm wrong, that standardized testing just doesn't work. We're not one size fit all. We all think differently, don't we?
We aren't, exactly. And that's why, tightening up, tying standards to curriculum, ultimately to assessment, is really creating a one-size-fits-all system. And it's really tightening it down so that even if you have teachers who are great at what they do and they know how they see that child with dyslexia and they say, hey, here are things that I need to do, it's going to be much more difficult for those teachers. Now, as to your caller's question about the standards themselves, or I think she's talking about curriculum and content within the schools, and are they getting better? Certainly with the English language arts and math standards, the Common Core standards, this is not a step up for the state of Wyoming. So, you will hear from all kinds of people that, our old standards were graded an F, and these standards are so much better, and you hear the word rigor, which I utterly despise, because I dislike it because it's not about rigor. It's not making something hard for the sake of hard. It's about what is excellent in education. What do we want our kids to learn? So as far as the standards goes, and for the caller, in your Campbell County, you can go onto your local school district website and look at the curriculum map, and you're going to find out whether they teach the multiplication tables or they've changed over. I can tell you the math standards probably have removed most of that.
I hate to cut you off, but that's it. Hard break. Gotta go. Good to see you again, Amy.
Good to see you, Glenn.
Yeah.